Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday, or I should say happy Liberation Day to you. It's about 7 minutes past the hour. Welcome. 833-482-5337-8334 Valdez is our phone number if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation. And again, it is Liberation Day. At least that's what Donald Trump, our president, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th and 47th president of these United States, has dubbed it Liberation Day. And I want to give you a clip. You may have heard it already, but I want to play it for you anyway. Listen to this.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. We're going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen, not going to happen. And listen, I'm happy about that. I believe that it gets a little rough before it gets a little bit better. But again, this is what happens when you have 4 years of derelict policies from Joe El Baboso Biden. And you got all sorts of people now coming out of the woodwork, I should say, with stories about Joe Biden. I heard some reports earlier today about Joe Biden being on board with just a heightened sense of being camera ready for Joe Biden. Now, listen, I think if I were president, I probably would opt for no makeup because, I do radio and I don't wear makeup. But when I do go on TV, they kind of like push you into that chair. And I don't have a whole lot of hair, so there's not much of the hair in the hair and makeup. But, to make sure my shiny head doesn't, blind the viewers at home, they do a whole lot of, little powdering and this and that. And, you go with it, go with the flow. So I would presume that when you're president of the United States, that there's, some of that pomp and circumstance that comes with the job. So I don't know if that's a big breaking news headline story that Joe Biden had makeup artists before he went on Zoom calls. But the bigger story is people were internally concerned, just like people externally, like me and you and the rest of us, were concerned about his cognitive decline. And they pushed him to do what he did anyway. One report said that Kamala Harris was looking for people that would, give her advice should he die in office, because she had an expectation. Again, I don't know if that's true, but I would presume that, that would go through anybody's mind if they're in the number 2 job, What happens if, right? So anyway, those policies of Joe El Baboso Biden and his partner in crime, Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, they put us where we are. So, when you talk about austerity, if you will, these are Trump's versions of austerity measures, tariffs. And again, I'm not a fan. If this were the way to do things always, And we didn't do it the way he's doing it, with pushing for reciprocal tariffs and using leverage, right? You have to use leverage. You have to leverage the buying power of the United States. If you don't leverage that buying power, then you can't use tariffs effectively. And in effect, they will just tariff the crap out of us as well, right? It'll eventually cost us more money. But the way Trump is doing it, it's working, right? He's getting his way with so many of the things that he's asking for. When they don't do it, he's all right, here's a tariff. Here, try this on. And notice, Trump's talking 10, 20, 36, whatever, 46. These minimal, they can be big when you look at the percentages, but nothing like what some of these countries do to us with in the hundreds, 200, 270% on that dairy. That one blew me away. The fact that we're selling milk, or that, that they tariff American milk, American dairy products at 270% in Canada. Anyway, I say all of that to say, I believe that the Liberation Day stuff is working, but the media and their friends in the Democrat Party, the left within the media, the left within the Democrat Party, they're working in concert, and they're trying to get Republicans that are skittish about tariffs, myself included, right? I'm not a pro-tariff guy. I think Trump's particular strategy is effective, but I'm not a tariff aficionado, if you will. You got some people that swear by it. They're like, man, it's the best thing ever. I don't know that it's the best thing ever. And what do you mean? Before 1933, we did it. Okay, great. That's great. I haven't been around since 1933. I've been around now, and I can tell you that if you don't do it right, it isn't going to work well. That said, I think we're doing it right. But I think there's a number of people out there, both in Trump's orbit and outside of it, that are skittish. And the Democrats are seizing on this, and they're trying their best to get these guys to falter, to get out there and talk about what the president isn't seeing is how expensive it's going to be for this, that, and the third, and this, that. You think he's not seeing that? I mean, I just want to point out, as a kid, growing up in Brooklyn, I moved to Jersey when I was 12 going on 13. I grew up looking at Trump Village, which was a big apartment complex, and then all these big buildings, right? And you had the Helmsleys, and you had Trump, and Tisch was a big builder. And these were the big names in the New York City skyline. And Trump was king, quite frankly. Now, not, king of America, king of the universe. He was king of the developers. He was young. He was in charge. He was doing his thing. And again, this is just me as a kid watching, the people that come out of New York. There was another guy that was very popular in New York, too, when I was a kid. It's a little fat man with a lot of hair. Think of like Elvis Presley's hair, but on a little fat man, African-American man. His name was the Reverend Al Sharpton. Again, now, this guy had no allure for me. I looked at him and I thought, this guy doesn't seem like he has anything going on. He doesn't look cool. He looks like a very, very fat rapper wearing a preacher's collar and a tracksuit. That's what he wore back then. And he just had a big mouth. But I didn't find any allure there. I wasn't like, man, when I grow up, I want to be like that guy. But when I saw Trump and, all these big buildings, he was in the news all the time, and he was sharp, he was smooth, debonair, I was like, this guy's cool. So anyway, I say all that to say, all the, my sycophantic stories aside, Trump has built a bunch of buildings in New York. Now, think about the last time you made a renovation in your home, or you fixed something in your apartment, or you did anything where you had to buy some materials and construct something. And think about how that old adage, measure twice, cut once, came into play. Do I just Ukraine right here? Think about that. And think about how many times you've screwed things up. Now, all that being said, Trump has built big, big buildings, beautiful buildings, casinos, golf courses, you name it. He knows a thing or two about saving money. In fact, they criticized him widely about how he saved money and how, he didn't pay this, he didn't pay that. They try to beat him up on everything. So when a guy that has done well for himself financially, when a guy that has handled so many building projects in the biggest and greatest city in the world, puts forth a plan like this, I can't help but think, you know what? I got to give him the benefit of the doubt, because this is his forte, building things and saving money. And he's been beating this drum forever and ever and ever. So all I could say is, I think, hang on, folks. Liberation Day is the beginning of something that I think is going to be very effective for Americans. I'm going to continue my thoughts on the other side of this, but I want to remind you of something, because I think it's important that we remember these things. And one of the things that, to me, is important, besides, giving the benefit of the doubt and making sure that we're able to understand all of the importance of Liberation Day, if you will, is how important you guys are to this program. Without you, the listener, right, and all of your 5-star reviews on the podcast and all that stuff, which I really appreciate, your calls, your live calls, which we'll be doing plenty of this hour. If you can hear me right now and you want to call in, feel free. But the reason you guys matter is because this format of radio, it's so different. It's not a tweet. It's not TV where you watch and you hear. It's kind of one way. This is an actual dialogue. You're calling me. I'm calling you. We're live. All right, I'm talking to you. You're talking to me. You're talking to everybody in America at the same time, because it's like a big party line. That's why I like to call it our late night national town hall conversation. And without radio, this particular format, it's just not possible. So make sure you have a radio, because if you love radio like I do, talk radio, podcasts, get yourself a C. Crane radio. The one I'm recommending right now, the CC Radio 3. It delivers exceptional spoken word audio. Clarity. You're going to feel like I'm right in the room with you. The CC Radio 3, it's got long-range AM, FM stations, so you can hear them from all over the place. Exceptional reception. You've got an emergency feature like the NOAA weather band and the 2-meter ham band. This is fantastic, right? Now, it runs on a power cord that it comes with. You can plug it in, or you get a set of batteries. Check this out, 170 hours of battery life. The CC Radio 3 is what they call the almost everything radio, because you can listen to your favorite podcast. That's me, Rich Valdez, America at Night. Your favorite radio show, ditto, and your favorite music, as well as Bluetooth from any smartphone or smart speaker. So here's how you order the CC Radio 3. I'm going to give you the phone number. I hope you write it down. 800-522-8863. That's 800-522-8863. Or you go to the C. Crane website, ccrane.com/rich. I'll spell it out for you. That's CCRANE/RICH, and use my name, Rich, RICH, when you check out, and you get 10% off any order over $75. So do that now. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
We will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart? And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate.
A lot of bad things happening at the gate. And he says Trump, in effect, is putting this message out to all of his trading partners, saying that everybody's going to get one. Everybody's getting a tariff if they've got one on us. That's what the whole idea of Liberation Day is about. And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, or Prime Minister candidate, is is responding to that. Listen to this.
President Trump has just announced a series of measures that are going to fundamentally change the international trading system. Now, in doing so, he has preserved a number of important elements of our relationship, the commercial relationship between Canada and the United States. But the fentanyl tariffs still remain in place, as do the tariffs for steel and aluminum. As of this evening, the tariffs on automobiles will enter into force, and the U.S. has signaled that there will be additional tariffs in so-called strategic sectors, pharmaceuticals, lumber, and semiconductors.
So that's Mark Carney. Doesn't sound very enthusiastic, but he's playing ball, right? Because he doesn't want to lose his shirt, right? Because everybody ultimately needs to sell stuff to the Americans. Now, the day that that's not true anymore, you lose your leverage, right? So you have to know how to play your hand. But in this case, I think we still have enough of an economy where we can do that. So I want to know your thoughts. Do the tariffs have you running scared? Are you thrilled about them? Are you in the middle? Let's get some thoughts here. Let's go to Tony, Silver Spring, Maryland, WMAL. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, Rich. First time talking to you. I have a question for you. Let's say that the tariffs work as Trump says they will, and I certainly, willing to give anything a try. I'm a little bit nervous about it, as you mentioned you were. But even if they work as, he'd like, what about the factor, and I'm talking specifically with China, that their labor costs are still far lower than American companies. Laborers get paid a few dollars a day or whatever it is, compared to $20, $30 an hour for certain industries. How can American companies not want to outsource when the labor costs are as I just mentioned? Could you just, I don't know. I'm not an economist. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll explain it. This is where I think it's most effective, right? So if it costs $1 a day for what would cost you here, I don't know, $600 in labor, you put the amount of tariffs on China that it would cost to even the playing field in the United States, where it no longer makes sense. Now, what does that do ultimately? That raises the cost of certain goods, right? Certain goods, not all goods. Now, what Trump is doing, I am way more draconian than him. If I were in his shoes, I would be destroying China right now. And in vis-a-vis, I would catch a lot of enemies. I would probably be putting dollar stores out of business because they bring so many small trinket items in from China, and a lot of other businesses that rely on a lot of plastics that are made in China. But ultimately, I would price them out of the market where you'd have to source your goods from the United States in order to do business here. And China would be out. Trump is smarter than me, and he's not doing that. He's making it so that it's death by 1,000 cuts to China. They can't really pass this on to the consumer because the minute they do, it doesn't make that much sense. So maybe they do a little, but the minute it becomes too much, it doesn't make sense and people will go elsewhere. And when you have free trade, now other countries can try to compete. Whereas right now, there are things in place that would not allow that. So I'm sorry I can't get into it as much, but I will on the other side of this break. The music means I got to go. Tony in Silver Spring, thank you, sir. WMAL, I'm coming right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez working the late shift with you straight till midnight, 1 a.m. in some parts of the country. Of course, if you're on the West Coast, that's in Pacific time, and so maybe 10 p.m. where you are. I'm on 7 to 10 p.m. in a lot of Pacific stations. But I want to go back to my thought because we hit the bottom of the hour music and I wasn't able to finish the response to Tony and complete my thought. But ultimately, what Trump is doing, and from what I can gather, right, this is not from any conversation I've had with him regarding this particularly, as you start to put the squeeze play, right, because again, Trump's whole MO is always, let's make a deal. It's always about making a deal. And in trying to make a deal here, he's presenting an option saying, look, let's do these things fairly. You know, like, for example, they're not selling American cars or very many American cars in China. They sell their own cars. They make sure that if you are buying an American car, you're paying through the nose for it, right? So those types of things have to go away. Now, the labor issue is a legitimate issue, and the fact that they rob us blind when it comes to intellectual property and that they counterfeit drugs and all sorts of things is not to be taken lightly. So I think you need to have not just tariffs. I think that we likely should have sanctions. But again, this is a major trading partner of the United States. So you can't be as draconian as I would like to be. And this is why people say run for office. I get laughed out of town because my ideas are too crazy. But Trump is putting the squeeze play slowly, letting them know, look, today it's this much. We got to go up another one. We'll go up a little more, and we'll keep going up until we get people weaned off of China, right? So it's a gradual approach. And as you do that, you start cutting deals. Indonesia, Dominican Republic, and a lot of people are doing it, right? China themselves have realized that they've been losing market share in the manufacturing business. So they decided on their own to start buying up factories so that things don't say made in China, that they could say made in Vietnam, made in Mexico, made in other parts of the world where they are, masquerading as those people. India, they have factories in India. It's all made in China, though. And while this is happening, we can still do business with those people. There was a designer some years ago who only made his stuff in the Dominican Republic. I think his name was Oleg Cassini. And it was a relatively affordable labor, probably not as cheap as China, but he didn't want to deal with China for whatever reason. I don't know if it was because of maybe his order runs weren't big enough, or he didn't like the fact that it was too far away. He didn't have the relationships, whatever. Point was, that's what they did. And I see more and more people doing that. I don't make anything, but every now and again I will order some T-shirts, with my logo on it, and for merchandise for the show. And I can tell you that the easiest thing to do is do one of those websites where you get the T-shirts for a couple of bucks each, and you sell them and you make a profit. However, I wanted to make sure that it was cotton that was sourced, in the United States, and it was something that was assembled here in the United States, and it was something that was printed here in the United States, and made in America meant something to me. Guess what? I was paying 4 times the price. So, like, the wholesale cost to me for the shirts that I've made, which some of our listeners have some, was something like $14 or $12 per shirt. So just imagine if you were selling something like that for $15, you weren't making any money, right? So clearly you let people know this is made in the USA type of product, and you're going to pay made in the USA prices. Many years ago, my brother told me, you got to stop eating out of stainless steel, and you got to stop eating out of aluminum. It's not good for you. I said, what do you want me to eat out of? And he says, you got to eat out of cast iron skillets. They weigh a ton, and they're very expensive. And for a while, I did, just because he gave me one. And I was like, oh, nice. And I used it, and it was made in America. It was a beautiful piece. I mean, it's just the handles get really hot, and you got to be careful, right? Because you're so used to the plastic and the Teflon and all that. Long story short, it really is a good product, and it's nice to cook in those cast iron skillets. A little bit more difficult, I think, with cleanup, and you have to season them with oil and stuff like that. As the term that's used for priming it with oil. But all that being said is to make the point that certain people really do espouse the idea of America first. And I think President Trump is great at selling that idea. So as we put the squeeze play on China, and you get a couple of trading partners that come in and say, look, right now with the tariffs where they are on China, and I'm thinking of raising them, I could make you competitive with China and put you on the map, and you can get a piece of that American market share. This is Trump talking now, right? I think you're going to have a lot of people that say, you know what, we will cut our costs. We'll bring it down to as low as we can to earn that business from the United States. And this is the equivalent of building a building in New York. When you go to somebody, now he had to deal with the mob and whatnot, but if you're dealing with different vendors and you say, you know what, I want to go to the mom and pop, one that I know has the capacity to do this, I'm going to tell them, look, this is the biggest project you ever had. You're going to be rich after this. But you got to give me this price. Can you do that? If you do that, the business is yours. And then boom, that's how you build these relationships. And sometimes you just have to be competitive with a promise, right? That you're not China. And people will make that move. So I think that process looks something like that, and it's not something that happens overnight. At the same time, I think as you begin to put tariffs of 30 and 40% on China, some commensurate number, commensurate percentage is going to start impacting their economy. I can't imagine that things will remain the same. So, you know, let's say a 30% tariff affects their economy, I don't know, by a shrinkage of whatever percent. Once you figure out how that formula looks, you just keep applying pressure. You keep shrinking that economy, and you either get them to play ball the way they want to, the way you want them to, or you just push them out completely. Now, I don't know that happens eventually because they're, you know, this mega power, and Trump likes to get along with everybody, but he likes to have the upper hand. And I would too if I were him. The United States should always have the upper hand, right? At least that's how I see it. So that's, I guess, a more complete version of my thought. Hope that made sense to you. And I want to bring, I got to take another one. Well, I'll set it up this way. There's a clip that I want to play for you from today of a guy named Doug Ford. Now, the other day we played a clip from him, and he was talking tough. He said, you got to feel the pain, right? This is the same guy that said, we'll shut the lights off in America. We'll stop sending power to the United States. Remember him? He's the premier of Ontario, Canada. Anyway, Doug Ford made a statement today that I want you to hear, but we'll do that straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, you, of course, have a track record now. People have heard you, and they know that, in fact, you've got the goods. You have talent, and you have the ability to do a superb job.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, and we continue the conversation. And I was talking about tough-talking Canadian premier from Ontario, Doug Ford. Now, the other day, Count Dracula, what was the date on that original audio that we're about to play? Okay, on the 28th of March, so 5 days ago, right? More or less. Here's what Doug Ford said. Listen to this.
I can assure you one thing, we're going to make sure that we inflict as much pain as possible to the American people without inflicting pain on the Canadian population. You know, all he's doing is hurting the American people. He thinks the cost is going to go down for automobiles in the U.S. It's the total opposite. The costs are going to go skyrocketing.
Well, there's Doug Ford inflicting as much pain as possible on the U.S. This is the same guy who said any of our energy producing companies that are producing electricity in particular that goes to the United States, we're going to turn your lights off. You're not going to have any power from us. Well, tough talking premier Mr. Man over here, he was on the CBC, and they asked him, so how do you intend to do all this tough talking? And it seems that he's been liberated on Liberation Day because he says, I think we should just play ball with the U.S. Listen to this.
We understand the existing regime is in place, so the tariffs that are in place with the exemption of goods that are USMCA compliant. Does that mean, sir, at least in your mind, that it wouldn't be appropriate for Canada to retaliate for this at this time?
That is correct. If that's the case, then I would highly recommend to the Prime Minister not to retaliate, and let's carry on a strong relationship. Let's build the AMCAN fortress, American-Canadian fortress, around both countries and be the wealthiest, most prosperous, safest two countries in the world.
Wow. How did he become so liberated so fast? I mean, just the other day, he was turning off our lights and making it the most painful he could make it. The Americans will feel the most pain ever. Right? I remember that. I'm sure you do too, because I just played it for you. Now he's saying, I think that is correct. We should not retaliate against the United States. Oh, look at that. You know what? They've made a deal. They understand. They're playing ball. This is what I mean by the tariffs are effective. Talk tough, talk tough, talk tough. Who else was talking tough? Different topic, but who else was talking tough? You had the president of Colombia, right, who said, we're not taking those people back. Couple of tariff threats, couple of phone calls, a little back channeling. You know what? On second thought, he was liberated too. He said, I'm going to send the presidential plane to go get our people. Thank you so much, President Trump. You got to love a good negotiator, someone who's a good deal maker, someone who understands what's going on. Now, of course, critics are going to say, that's because he's an autocrat. Don't you see it? Unbelievable. You must have some autocratic dictatorial tendencies, Valdez, that you like this type of heavy-handed approach. No, I like an approach that gets results and is fair. He was fair. He said, these people are from your country. True or false? Yes, true. These people can't be here. True or false? Yeah, that's true too. Come and get your people. No? Hold on. Hold my beer. And now they came and got their people. Right? Because the one that was being unfair there was the president of Colombia saying we're not taking them back. That was unfair. So, again, I highlight these things to say I think that Liberation Day has been effective. Of course, there's a bunch of... I'm going to call them clowns. I'm not talking to you guys in the audience, but there are some clowns on Twitter that constantly send me this nonsense. They just make stuff up as they go along. They peddle a lot of fake news. But they thought that Liberation Day was going to be something else. That somehow there would a bunch of criminal Democrats were going to be marched to the gallows at Guantanamo Bay to be hanged at Gitmo by the commander-in-chief himself in the witness of a secret person named Q and another one named Q+, and one who might be the relative of JFK and all sorts of craziness. And I don't mean Secretary Kennedy. I mean just the craziness of these the things that people believe. And that didn't happen either. So I just do that to rub salt in the wounds of my crazy friends. Anyway, we continue with your thoughts, your calls, and opinions straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You have great guests on, and not only are they great, but they have the credentials, the background, and you always do your homework. Really appreciate everything you do.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, we continue with open phones across America, your calls and more. And let's go to the phones. Let's see here. We go to Ray, McLean, Virginia, WMAL. Ray, go right ahead, sir.
Hi, Rich. How are you doing this evening? I just want to say that you're doing a great job explaining something that can be a kind of a difficult topic for people to understand.
It's tough for me to understand.
Say that Exactly. I want to say that, I happen to be of the same school you are as a former economist from the New York Fed, that I'm not a favor generally as a rule of tariffs, but given President Trump's thinking here, I say that's the exception to the rule. He's basically looking to do two things, I think. Firstly, he's trying to put our trading partners on notice that they can't be, really fleecing us as they have been doing, and they're going to be getting a taste of their own medicine. And then secondly, given the geopolitical situation with China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, I think that he's trying to bring back more of our strategic industries back to our country. But what I wanted to know from you is what your thoughts were about the possibility of stagflation, because I see that as a very real possibility. I know the Atlanta Fed was indicating something of that in the latest Beige Book. So I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that and how we can avoid that, because I think that'll be very bad for the midterms.
I think avoiding stagflation is like saying, look, me and you, Ray, we're about to get into a fist fight and neither of us is going to get punched. It's crazy to think that we could do that. It's not going to happen. I think you're going to see some level of stagnation. You're going to see some level of inflation that will likely persist and to some degree, neither of which is wanted. And I don't know the ratio between the two, which if it's more stagnation or more inflation, but I think we'll see some of that as a result. And a lot of it I'm going to put at the feet of the Biden administration with their fourth quarter spending. But the rest of it, I think, is tariff fear, right? Tariff fear is real, and some of the fallout of that, which is also real. Now, you put all of that together, and I think it creates a bigger question where we ask ourselves, what happens then if our dollar continues to be inflated? How do we counter this, right? And I think if you look at gold, I have an interest in a jewelry business. Gold has been steadily creeping up, the biggest numbers we've ever seen, anybody's ever seen, right? So you look at that and you say, oh, wow, what's going on there? Then you also see some very steady, I'm going to say growth with digital assets and an interest from the administration in corralling the country's digital assets in a certain area. So I think at some point, and I don't know, this is, pure conjecture on my part, but I would venture to say there has to be something somewhere to really kind of catapult our economy, or at least the strength of the dollar to combat inflation. And it can't just be this Keynesian idea that we have. I think that we need more. And in order to get more buying power, I think we would see that happen if we return to the gold standard, or if there were some sort of mix between the two, maybe even a crypto that was gold-backed that could serve as something, maybe, that the dollar, I don't want to say attach itself to, but maybe something in that realm. I'm not sure if I know how to put all of what I'm thinking into words. But I think that is, to me, an obvious next step for where we go. So now, while that's not a direct answer to your question, I think, yes, we're going to see some stagflation, and I think the alarmists will continue to beat the drum of it because it's there and it's real and it'll happen. But eventually, I think we're going to see what you said, these strategic industries in our country coming back. And as that happens, we see more of it. And I think we saw a lot of this already happen when Trump was in office the first time. But COVID was the big monkey wrench. And I always think, but for COVID messing things up, how robust the economy would have continued to grow with the median household income growing, with Hispanics and Asians and blacks and every other demographic group becoming homeowners and earning more money. So I think as that happens, we get closer and closer to that as we get away from inflation. But we're going to see a little more inflation and maybe some stagnation before we get to that. And I think gold and crypto play a role in it. Hope some of that made sense. Ray, I appreciate the question. Hope you'll call back again soon. Folks, more from you all and more on this when we return. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the Wednesday night edition of the program, Liberation Day, and we're talking all about that. The phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And before we get into some tariff talk, I want to talk about a couple of things that are happening in my neck of the woods. Of course, the city of New York, Mayor Eric Adams, sounding a whole lot like Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, the 45th and 47th president of these United States. Mayor Eric Adams making an announcement today. Listen to this.
As you have heard, this case, the judge has dismissed it with prejudice, making it clear that it never can be brought back. Let me be clear. As I've said all along, this case should have never been brought. And I did nothing wrong. I'm now happy that our city can finally close the book on this and focus solely on the future of our great city.
Solely on the future of our great city. Now, I want to go from one New York Democrat to another. This one, Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is already doing his rounds in the media, getting everybody ready for the showdown that's about to go down on Capitol Hill tomorrow as they try to figure out, are we going to pass some version of Trump's big, beautiful bill? It's a big, beautiful bill. No tax on tips, right? No tax on overtime. Let me tell you, I don't know a Democrat alive that doesn't want that, a Democrat voter that doesn't want that to happen. So now they're going to have to use the old line, don't believe your lying eyes, right? And convince the people that when they vote against this, just like in the House, every single Democrat voted against it as a matter of principle because they knew they had the votes. I don't know if that's going to be the case because remember, we say we have a majority in the United States Senate, but yet we have people like Susan Collins and who's the other one besides McConnell? You got McConnell as well. You've got a number of people that are proverbially known as rhinos, Republicans in name only, that when you really need them, they will vote with the Democrats. And I don't know how they're going to vote. I don't know. We know McConnell's pretty much out, right? He's like, I'm not running for this. I'm not running for that. So he doesn't care. I think at this point, he just wants to screw Trump as much as he can. My particular opinion. But I'm wondering what will happen, right? Will they come out with some version of this? And usually when Democrats play ball, they go for bloat, right? They go to bloat this bill. They go, sure. You want no tax on tips, you said. Oh. You said you wanted no tax on overtime. Is that right? No tax on Social Security as well. Okay. Well, here's what I want. I want transgenders in every woman's sport. I want, and they just go through their wish list of crazy and try to get things for their district, pork barrel spending, you name it. Will it work? I don't know. We're going to find out what's going on there tomorrow. We'll get an update from some of the folks on Capitol Hill to keep us, up to speed on what happens and to see how far it advances if we do, in fact, get a vote tomorrow. But I know that's happening. Some of that's happening tomorrow. So here's Chuck Schumer.
These tariffs will cost them $5,000 as the prices of everything goes up, whether it's groceries or cars or wood or you name it, across the board. Why would Trump do this? Why would Trump do this? One reason. He wants to take the money, that he gains from tariffs to give tax cuts to billionaires. And when told that American families would would pay a whole lot more out of their pockets, you know what he said? I don't care. What kind of bubble is this man and his billionaire cohorts in?
Now, the only tax increases that American families are going to see are truly if we don't renew the Trump tax cuts and if we don't get the big, beautiful bill. The Trump tax cuts have to remain. And as that showdown goes down on Capitol Hill tomorrow, this week, whenever it is, Chuck Schumer is going to have to try and sell that idea and saying that Trump's raising your taxes. No, the Democrats are preventing a tax cut. And they're going to try and say, who's going to pay for that tax cut? When was the last time you paid for a coupon? I've never understood this argument. We don't have to pay for tax cuts. If you buy something for $5, just making a simple analogy, and you sell it for $10, and you haven't sold much today, and somebody comes in and says, hey, look, I want to buy it, but I want to pay you $7.50. That's the best I'll do. It's up to you whether you say, I'm going to make $2.50 as opposed to the $5 I was going to make, or I'm going to make zero. Right? This is the same philosophy. Who's going to pay for the tax cut? No one's going to pay for the tax cut. You spend less money. If you don't take it, if you can't rob me for 43% of my income, and let's say you only get me for 32%, guess what? You don't get to rob me for the 43%. That's it. You're going to have to figure out how to live off the 32% you rob me with. But people like AOC and other politicians don't understand that. Who's going to pay for the tax cut? Who's going to give me the 11% I'm missing there? Your mother. That's who's going to pay. Now, I'm not. Unbelievable the gall the Democrats have. Anyway, speaking of Democrats and gall, they're not the only ones that are upset with El Trumpito. You know who else is upset with him? A few world leaders shaking in their boots on how Trump's tariffs are going to change the game. And listen, there's serious implications here. Trump is literally making massive improvements to the global economy. Massive improvements for the United States. Forever and a day, we've had these trade imbalances, which some people say, oh, those don't matter. Oh, those don't matter. But I would venture to say they matter in so much as what Trump has been talking about. Right? Trump has made it very clear. If you build stuff in the United States, guess what? No tariff for you. If you're not building in the United States and you want to continue your cheap labor, your forced labor camps, whatever it is, you're going to pay a tariff. No tariff? Come to America. What does that do? That means now you have to employ Americans. Americans getting paid to do work. People that own warehouses, renting out those warehouses, selling those warehouses to companies that are building manufacturing warehouses, distribution warehouses, part-time work, delivery people bringing lunch to the people that are working, overtime because they're not getting taxed on overtime. Do you get the picture? How this thing starts to shape up? When you put all this together and you have to have the right framework to make these things right. That's what politics is often about, creating conditions. And Trump is creating conditions for an economic revival in this country. Now, I know a lot of people think it's pie in the sky and you need all the stars and the moon and the sun to align at the same time for this thing to happen. I don't think it's that intricate. I think you have to stay focused on the goal and make sure that you can convince everyone of why they should play ball, which so far with our neighbors, Trump has been very effective at convincing people, saying, hey, look, this is how this is going to go down. Now, they're barking right now. They're upset because the United States is a big trade partner for a lot of people. And like he says, and they've been ripping us off for a very long time. So I want you to listen to a couple of world leaders chiming in here. Let me just tell you who they are because it's a pretty... What's the number on this, Count Delacula? 26. Listen to this. You've got Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, Olaf Gill, the European Commission spokesman, Keir Starmer, who I always call Kieran for whatever reason, the UK Prime Minister. Sophie Primus, she's from the French government. She's a spokesperson there. Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister. I love the way she sounds, even though she's not very happy in this particular clip. But check this out.
Australia's exports to the United States represent about under 5% of our goods exports. Okay, so let's have some perspective here about standing up for Australia's national interest.
On our response, all I can say is that there will be one. It will happen at the appropriate moment after the expected announcement later this evening.
Let me be clear with the House. A trade war is in nobody's interests. And the country deserves, and we will take, a calm, pragmatic approach.
Nous savons en revanche qu'il risque d'être assez puissant.
People are speaking of tariffs between 20 and 25%. This will obviously lead to major economic disorder on the affected products, not only in Europe but also in the United States. The U.S. is clearly a key market for us. It is clear that the introduction of new tariffs would have heavy repercussions for Italian producers.
Pesanti per I produttori italiani. Penso personalmente che sarebbe anche un'ingiustizia per molti americani perché
I personally think it would also be an injustice for many U.S. citizens because it would limit the possibility of buying and consuming our excellence only to those who can afford to spend more.
So there you have it. A lot of people up in arms. A lot of people up in arms because it sounds like a very unconventional way to achieve a particular result. And one that you can't really say, look, there's a whole bunch of historical precedent. When the last guy did this, it worked great. But does that mean it won't work? And how afraid are we? How afraid are people from banking? How afraid are people from manufacturing? How afraid are people from all over the country or all over the world in every industry to say this is either going to work or not work? Well, we're going to have that discussion straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. Going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen.
That, of course, President Trump earlier today out at the White House announcing that today is Liberation Day and making a lot of very, very, very bold pronouncements of what he expects to ensue with his tariff policy and overall economic plan for the country. And, of course, mixed reactions to that, right? A lot of people are concerned, a lot of people excited, right? A lot of people want to see manufacturing grow and become more robust and lots of things. So I want to have a discussion with someone from the banking world on this particular topic. Matthew McGuire is the former U.S. Executive Director of World Bank. Matthew McGuire, welcome.
Hi, Rich, welcome. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes, sir. So, Your thoughts on Liberation Day? Does it scare everything out of you? Does it excite you? Do you still have to wait to see what's going on? Your thoughts?
Bit of both. I'm excited by the idea that we can strengthen our manufacturing sector and have more manufacturing jobs here in the U.S. I'm quite scared by the tactic of how it looks like we're getting there. And what I mean by that is, strikes me that we're pulling out a playbook from, 100 years ago. I mean, these are big, big tariffs. And so much has changed in the world since then, right? We didn't have airplanes then, barely had cars, didn't have the internet, et cetera. But to be really clear, the part that worries me is it all comes down to American jobs, as everyone has said. What happens with the tariffs is it increases the price of U.S. businesses, right? Big tariffs they have to pay out every time they import something, which means that the prices that they have to pass on for consumers are going to go up, right? Like a car or food and all these other things. And when prices go up, what you see are sales go down. And when sales go down, what you see are layoffs. And so I'm really concerned here that this jolt, I love that the president is being bold, as you said, and he's aiming for something big, but I am very, very worried that we're going to see an awful lot of layoffs here. And the final thing I'll say is we got some preview of this in his previous administration where he took on China. A lot of ways we need to take on China. I'm all for that. But one of the impacts was our farmers, our soybean farmers in particular, saw China retaliate, and they haven't recovered even to being able to sell as many soybeans overseas as they had previous to that. So the tariffs has a tough record, and I'm just nervous that the actual execution here, the actual tactics are going to cause a lot of harm.
Now, looking at the past as, I guess, prelude for this current series of tariffs, it seems to me, and again, you give me your thoughts on it, that there was some level of success, right? And I think the tariff approach seems to be, from what I gather, it seems to be both strategic in trying to get people to bend on certain policy issues, as it is a stream of revenue for the Treasury with, like you said, importers paying these things. Now, I think the fear, which I join you in that, not fear, but, some sort of reticence where nobody wants to pay more for anything, right? So that part I get. The other part of it, I think, is if everything works and you do see manufacturing go from, 10% of our economy to, 30 or 40%, then it would pay for itself in effect, no?
It could. I think the question is, why is it so important that we have more of those jobs as opposed to improving the jobs that are here now? If 90% of the economy are service jobs, a mechanic, an electrician, a nurse, a waitress, what about focusing on how we make those jobs more attractive and make sure they're really paying a wage where you don't have to work a second job and so on and so forth? And then why don't we focus a bit more on how we can keep costs down for those people who are working hard paycheck to paycheck? So I think part of it on the strategic side is, manufacturing jobs are great, but we have an awful lot of other jobs that we could build out. And then the second thing I think on that is we have to have some more confidence that we see a path towards getting those factories built, which could take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What happens between now and then?
Well, there's that. Well, I guess a lot of construction workers make money on the build out. Matthew McGuire, thank you for your thoughts, sir. I appreciate you. Former U.S. Executive Director of the World Bank Group. And folks, we continue with the rest of our conversation on tariffs and whatnot, plus your calls coming up right now. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
We're at an independent used dealership here in North Bergen and North Jersey here, and I think these cars are going to be occupied very soon by people trying to save a buck on these cars because those tariffs, 25%, going to affect really a lot those new cars. So there's a lot to get into. These tariffs have been great for dealers as well because they have not just dealers, but also the automakers because they are making a lot of money right now because of the threat of these tariffs here. So automakers have sold more than 1.5 million vehicles in the U.S. in March, up 14% from bringing total sales for the first quarter to just under $4 million. So for the quarter alone, so far, sales are up to nearly $4 million here. And according to website motorintelligence.com, almost all automakers saw a surge in electric vehicle sales as well. So the major car companies here reporting double-digit gains, many experts attributing this to those impending tariffs.
That is Marcus Espinoza with News Nation with the report there. And again, I think this is one of the things, everybody has an opportunity here to look at things half empty, half full, right? Look at the glass how you like. And to the report that we just heard, he said, well, the dealers are really liking this. Why? Because they're selling all their old inventory that wasn't selling because of a stagnant economy, likely stagnant because of inflation in part. Right? So now, all of a sudden, now people have an incentive to go buy a car because it might get more expensive, what was previously sitting on the lot. And this is important, right? Because you want to keep things going, right? And I get it. It didn't make sense before, but now it makes sense because people, maybe the prices will come down. Now you know the prices may not come down, at least for another 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Or as our previous guest mentioned, it might take time to build some of these factories, which I agree will take some time, but I still think is a great thing. The Industrial Revolution wasn't something that happened overnight. And I think if it takes a couple of years to prep it, okay. Now, I don't think this is going to take a couple of years. Why? Because Marcus Espinoza just showed me a real-world example of how Trump says Liberation Day is April 2nd, 2025, right? He said that. And this guy was at the dealership today saying these cars look like they're all going to be sold because things are picking up, right? Now, track with me here because I'm not, like I've said a million times, I'm no fan of tariffs. It's not my go-to, right? I'm not the tariff guy. I'm not. But I will say this. I think Trump's plan for tariffs is a very, very strategic one. And I think it's one that's going to be effective and was effective in the past, right? But effective doesn't mean that it doesn't come with some caveats along the way, that things don't become a little bit more expensive at first because people don't want to play ball right away, right? So some people say, all right, hey, look, 10%, all right, what are you going to do? Some people might say, I'll split the 5 and 5, 5 for the consumer, 5 for me. We'll have to eat the shipping cost or whatever it is, import cost. Some might say that. Others might say, you're paying the whole thing. And then that becomes true. It's going to be more difficult. So now imagine if you're importing washing machines and you start to lose business, at what point do you say, well, Hyundai's got a steel plant that's being built in Indiana. There's been a lot of effort to save the steel industry in the United States. What if I go and strike a deal with the steel people and say, look, I need some sheet metal. I'm going to start building my machines here. Or what if Maytag or any of these other people that build outside of the country, they turn around and they say, you know what? We need to start building here because we can save that 25% that the end user is getting, and we're seeing that dip in sales now. So maybe it makes sense for us to build here. Right? There's going to be a point of diminishing returns for everybody. And it's Trump's job to figure out how to apply that pressure evenly and fairly. By fairly, I don't mean in a morally fair kind of way. I mean in a reasonable amount of pressure kind of way, right? An even amount, a fair amount of pressure so that we can continue to keep the gas going. Maybe instead of going 65 miles an hour, we may have to get to 70, maybe even hit 80 for a minute so that these tariffs go up a little bit to get people to move a little faster, to say, all right, let's get things done. Now it doesn't make sense for us to sell in the U.S. anymore at this rate. Now we got to build there. Now, something the guest mentioned, which I think is a point that is valid for some, but my I guess my reaction to that, we had to pause for the bottom of the hour, but ultimately, why not focus on other industries? I think manufacturing is a big deal for a lot of things. If you can grow manufacturing while eliminating trade imbalances, to me that sounds like you're killing two birds with one stone, right? Now I can understand people that are in global banking, want to see a global economy, a robust global economy. I think President Trump specifically ran not on an isolationist campaign, but using some elements of isolationism, like tariffs and the America First mantra, to strengthen us internally, right, domestically, because we need to be strengthened internally and domestically. And during the break, I was just mentioning to Count Delacula, I'm going to get to your calls. I know there's a few people waiting so forgive me for my long-winded thought here. But ultimately, when you get to that point that people are saying, you know what, it makes sense. We have to get this place. Now, these build-outs, you now have construction people, you've got skilled trades, plumbers, electricians, you name it. All these people are gonna have jobs. All the people that are the Grubhubbers of the world, the food truck guys that come, the lunch truck guy, all those people now have employment opportunities because of these new factories. Right? To me, it makes a lot of sense. It's probably the best sector to try and bring things back to. Plus, if you just look at history, at least from my opinion, while what the guest said was true, a lot of things in the economy have changed. That's true. Times have changed. But that doesn't mean that they changed for good. Right? I think the reintroduction of China into the World Trade Organization was probably a strategic blunder of Bill Clinton's. I think that offshoring so much of our manufacturing to the point where when I was in high school and you went to go have a fight after school, meet me at 3 o'clock in the back of the school. But the back of our school had a huge field. And it's funny, that report that the guy said, I'm at a parking lot, at a used car lot in North Bergen, New Jersey. That's where I went to high school, North Bergen High School. And the street right behind the high school is Cottage Avenue. Cottage Avenue is where everybody went to go have their fist fight after school. And Cottage Avenue is filled like back to back to back. Maybe today they've knocked some down. Maybe they've turned some into condos. But back to back factories, mainly garments. They produced garments. They produced textiles. All that stuff was produced here into the 90s when I was in high school. It only began to disappear after that. So I think, those were the days when so many of my contemporaries, their parents worked in those places. Some of their dads that drove the trucks that did the deliveries. Many of their moms worked on the sewing machines in the factories. This was big. It was, Silk City, Paterson, New Jersey was known for that. Union City, New Jersey, the embroidery capital of America. This was a big deal in America. We were doing what China did. Now China has replaced us. So just imagine bringing it back. And all I could think of is back in 1999, you could buy a house for $200,000 that today is probably worth close to $1 million in most places. And most people could afford it back then. Most people, like regular people, like dad and mom with a part-time job. Still, at least in that area. So do we get back to that? I don't know that we do, but I think this is as good a plan as any. That'll get us close to it. Anyway, let me see. We go to the phones? Yes, we will go to the phones. And we're going to I'm told to take a break. So the count says we take a break. I come right back to Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, Idaho, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, here we go. Where do I want to start? Let's go to Bob. He's in Riverhead, New York, WJJF. Bob, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Well, the thing I think we need to highlight first off is everybody's looking at the front end of the tariffs and what the cost is going to be to the consumer. But they're a negotiating tool. And since we likely have the deeper pockets, if the tariff goes away from the other side and we drop them, the tariff is a non-issue as far as higher consumer costs. The other thing is bringing in these high-tech companies and these car manufacturers means we're not bringing in jobs that are fast food jobs. They're going to be high-paying jobs. You already mentioned that the construction, the electricians, all those guys will be part of the build. But once those companies are in place, I do believe that you will have higher-paying jobs for Americans, and you'll be employing more Americans. So I think this tariff issue is likely transitory. I'll use that because I think it's temporary, depending on the deeper pockets. And we're forgetting about this fact that those new jobs coming in are going to be paying very well. And those companies, if they sit on the other side and they pay a tariff, they get nothing for it. If they instead take that money and invest it here to build a plant, they're getting a return for their investment. You'd have to be dumb not to do it. So that's
Bob,
pretty much advice. I think the tariffs are good.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point, that ultimately the tariff is something that can, in effect, be avoided. And in the case where it can't be avoided, right, where we have to absolutely have something that can only be produced elsewhere, then they either pay the tariff or they match the reciprocal tariff, or they don't. And I think this is this is one of those things like peonies, right? Peonies, a lot of them come from the Netherlands. They don't grow too many of them in the United States. So if you want peonies during peony season, they're expensive. And the reason they're expensive, because you got to import them. And they're probably going to get more expensive, and people that like peonies will pay for the peonies because we don't make them here. Now, if somebody can figure out how to get peonies here, and I'm sure they grow them somewhere, but I know they don't grow on the East Coast for sure, at least definitely not in the winter, then they'll figure that out. And that's the exact example that you're making. Either do it here or don't and pay. And that's what Trump's been saying too. Very good point, Bob. Thank you so much. Let me continue. Let us go to David. David is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on KDKA. David, go right ahead. Your thoughts.
Hi, Rich. Always good to tune into your show. I was in high school, early high school, when the first oil crisis came. But that's not what I want to talk about. The pollinators in decline started in the early 2000s. Pesticide abuse, I feel, is the main culprit. I have a degree from Penn State in the food industry-related fields, and I took classes in agricultural engineering there. Pesticide abuse, the neonicotinoids, the glyphosate, I hope I had that right.
Are you a beekeeper today?
And they are...
No, are you a beekeeper?
Drastically reducing.
Can you hear me, David?
Food we can produce.
Can you hear the words I'm saying? Or are you like reading a prepared script? Can you hear me?
No, I'm well read. I've been reading on it for
But I'm talking to you, and
now.
you're talking right through me. Are you a beekeeper?
No, I talked to a beekeeper in the Squirrel Hill section of Pittsburgh, and he said, "Don't get into it. It's too much of a hassle, and really, there's no money in it, and it's not worth it." Especially now, he's trying to open up a shop to sell honey, and he can't sell any. And the pollinators are in rapid decline in this country. And the food.
Well, I know that. That's been going on for a long time. But what I find interesting here is that he's not making any money, because if you go buy some raw honey from a beekeeper, it's at least one arm and one leg, and they might want one of your kids too. I don't know how he's not making money.
Still is, but nobody buys it. Oh, this is Pittsburgh. We don't have the steel mills anymore. We have 3, and they're even talking of shutting 1 or 2 of them down now.
Oh, boy.
U.S. Steel is.
Well, I think there was a deal with that they tried to to prevent those closures from happening. So hopefully it doesn't happen. David, I got to leave it there. I got to take a pause right here. Folks, we're coming right back. The rest of your calls and more straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
A lot of people say I do a tremendous job. And Rich Valdez does a tremendous job, I can tell you that. He's a fantastic person.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez working the late shift with you, keeping you company until midnight, 1 a.m. in some areas on the East Coast. Of course, till 10 p.m., 11 p.m. on the midnight, all sorts of places, right? I got all sorts of times on the Pacific side of the country, and I'm happy to be with you. Now, I want to go to your calls. Let's go to Dothan, Alabama, WDBT, and check in with Ted. Ted, go right ahead quickly.
Hey, Rich, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I read a great book once upon a time. It was called House of Bush, House of Sod. I was wondering if you ever saw it or...
What point would you like to make from the book?
Well, it was so well researched that I read the follow-up book. He wrote a second one called...
What's the point, though? The point? Because there are 6 million people listening, and they don't know the book, so you got to give us the idea.
Well, I think quite a few do if they read a lot.
I think you're full of it. Have a good night, sir. Let's go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Go right ahead, sir.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich. My original thought about tariffs were, when I knew nothing about them, was that it was more kind of a bluffing mechanism you could use with a winning hand, of course, in your hand. And the more I watched the news over the months after Trump had started talking about them, I learned more and more and more. And it's an evening mechanism is what it is. Maybe not all the way, but as close as possible. And I feel as though with Canada, if they're going to keep their word and play by the rules they were just talking about on the news on your show, there's a good possibility you can have a domino effect, I believe, and it could be very, very positive.
Yeah, listen, I think you're right. I am, like I keep saying, I'm not a fan of tariffs because I'm not. I don't think it's a singular approach to doing things. And again, if it's done haphazardly, like we've seen in some cases in the past, I think Hoover didn't do a great job with his implementation of tariffs, but Teddy Roosevelt had a little bit better experience. The bottom line for me on this one is Trump is not just implementing tariffs. He's implementing an entire plan. And he's saying, look, there is a tariff that is completely arbitrary because we're giving you a chance to have zero tariff. This is not just to protect our industry. He's not using protectionism. He's not saying, look, you can't touch. No, he's saying build here. So in effect, it's this very cool type of protectionism where, yeah, you can make money. A Chinese company can come and build a factory in the United States. Let's make a deal. You got to hire Americans and you got to build right here. This is the best of both worlds, right? They get to do their business in our country, tariff free. And I think it's a very fair proposal. Now, for some, they might say, no, are you kidding me? My investment, my infrastructure, everything I build with, my labor source is all in China. Why would I come to the U.S.? Well, then you work on the tariffs. What do you want me to tell you? Right? And while we're doing that, everybody else is catching up. Like you said, evening the playing field. So I think it's a risky proposition, but one that I think is going to be effective. Paul in Boise, Idaho, KBOI, thank you for the call, brother. And amigos, we continue with the rest of your calls and more conversation. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, though. I want to talk about what's going on at the Department of Education. So anyway, keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the Wednesday night edition of the program. It's Liberation Day, as President Trump has dubbed it, and of course, it's 7 minutes past the hour. Our phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. We are live. We're national. Looking forward to speaking with you on open phones across America in a little bit. Going to have lots of conversation tonight. We've had some excellent conversations tonight. People that agree, people that disagree. I'm going to get into a number of other items this evening. But President Trump making his announcement about liberation today. And, of course, speaking about the big, beautiful bill, the big, beautiful bill. And the question remains that will the big, beautiful bill include the Trump tax cuts, which are set to expire and will be the topic tomorrow on Capitol Hill. What do we do with the Trump tax cuts? Now, I hope that the Democrats are smart and renew these tax cuts. Otherwise, it will be on their head to increase taxes like we've never, ever seen. But Trump respectfully asks them to consider the big, beautiful bill, which includes no tax on tips and no tax on overtime and no tax on Social Security, and maybe even name it Big Beautiful Bill. Listen to this.
But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader, appreciate it, Mike, John Thune have been fantastic, by the way. But they've been working tirelessly on taking the next step to pass the plan for our one big, beautiful bill. I'd like to name it that if you can. One big, I made that statement about 6 months ago, and everybody calls it one big, beautiful bill. And it will be that. It'll have everything, the big tax cuts and every incentive there is. And it'll be fantastic. And by the way, for the cars, we're asking for an interest deduction on a loan. So if you build the car, only in America we do it, Brian. If the car's not built in America, you don't get the interest rate deduction. But if you build the car in America, if you buy a car, if it's built in America, then you get an interest rate deduction, tax deduction, and that's a big thing. That's going to be a big thing. I think that's going to pay for itself very quickly, that deduction. Never happened. We've never had anything like that before. Somebody said, where do you get the idea? Because it's so basic. You would think that would have happened a long time ago. It never did, and I'm very happy it didn't, because now I can say that was my idea.
You got to love that. And let's just take that apart for a second, right? So if you buy a car, a BMW, a Lamborghini, whatever, that happens to be made in the United States, because, again, people may want to avoid the cost of the import and all that by doing that. Now, just imagine that, Lamborghini building cars in the United States. How would that work? Is it still German equipment if it's not built in Germany? Is it still a Lambo if it's not coming from Italy? I don't know. I don't know. I once bought a Ford for the sake of buying an American car, and when I peeled off the window sticker, it said, engine produced in Germany, transmission produced in France. Ford. It was a brand new car too. So these are some of the questions, right, that come to mind. Now, I think President Trump says if the car is made in America, whomever makes it, right? Hyundai is going to be making them here. Honda is going to be making them here. Others already make them here. Then guess what? You are entitled to a tax deduction. I don't know how much, but that's what they're suggesting on the interest on that car loan. I love that. Up until now, it was only mortgage interest, right, that you could write off. So just imagine if you buy an American car, that's a real tax incentive that would get people to buy them, kind of like what Biden did with electric cars. And now the same people that were all for the electric cars are all out to get Elon Musk. Oh, and that's the other big story of the day. Elon Musk, right? I've been meaning to talk about that since a couple of hours ago. The White House putting out a statement earlier saying this is fake news. Elon Musk saying it's fake news. These reports that Musk is being pushed out of the White House by Trump. Of course it's fake news. Since when does Trump use subtlety and tact when firing someone? I mean, let's be real here. Not even his biggest critics will be able to argue that, no, he's always tactful. He always keeps it hush. No. When Trump wants to fire you, he puts a tweet out. And he says, you're a moron, you're fired, right? Now, I'm being exaggerated here for the sake of humor and a little bit of provocativeness. But Trump has never been subtle that way. He said it a million times. I wish I could keep Elon forever. He said it last night. I played it last night. And he said, but Elon's eventually going to go. He's only allowed to be there, I think, through May because of his special government employee status. So what's the big whoop here? Why all this big to do? Because they want to make it seem like if he finishes on time and under budget or ahead of time and on budget, then somehow if he says, you know what, I'm here till May, but I'm gone in April. So, that somehow there's a rift. And maybe there is a rift. I can't imagine high stakes players in anything not having a rift. Most married people I know have rifts amongst themselves. Most siblings I know have rifts. Most people I've done business with, there's not always a clear path. Always, sometimes there's a rift. So just imagine that you would have this match made in heaven between Elon Musk and President Trump. Of course, I would imagine that they have some rift, but at the end of the day, it seems like they do get along really well, and it's a fairly effective relationship, I would say, right? Uncovering all this Doge expenses. Anyway, waste, fraud, and abuse. So I just wanted to put that out there. Anyway, other news, right? There was something else that I wanted to play. It's not coming to mind, but there is a investigation by the Department of Education going on now into the state of Maine. If you remember a couple of months back, the governor of Maine famously got into a back and forth quite publicly with President Trump while he was at the podium giving remarks and said, well, you should follow the rules. We are the federal law. Yeah, if we could find that file clip, I'll play that for you just to remind you of the case. And now the Department of Education is looking into them because apparently they're allowing things to happen that shouldn't happen, like allowing men to play in women's sports or boys to play in girls' sports. That's a big no-no, and we're going to have a conversation on that straight ahead, as well as your thoughts, calls, reactions to all of the news of the day, talking about what's going on in America at night with me, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The Maine Department of Education is facing a new deadline after receiving what the U.S. Department of Education is calling a final warning to comply with President Trump's executive order banning biological males from girls' sports. The Department of Education sent a letter Monday giving Maine until April 11th to sign the compliance, or it will send the case to the Department of Justice. Maine officials originally had until March 29th to sign an agreement changing state law and policies to not allow transgender females to compete. But according to the regional director of the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, Bradley Burke, they are refusing to discuss a resolution.
That is a report from Kara Rucker, Straight Hour News. And this, of course, all stems from the back and forth that occurred with the governor of Maine and President Trump. You may remember that moment where the two got into it. I think we have the file tape. I'm going to play it for you real quick. Listen to this.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is the Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well,
Down here.
are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there.
And President Trump, again, egging her on. By the way, I did really well there, and your people don't like this topic, which I think is just fantastic. But that's just me and my penchant for his style. But I want to get into this a little bit because the Department of Education sending that final warning, and other gender issues are coming out of Maine as well. But one of the things I noticed in the report was that they were talking about the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights. And the former senior counsel to the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights is Sarah Parshall Perry. Now, today, she's a senior legal fellow at the Ed Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. But she's also here with us to discuss this. Sarah Parshall Perry, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
You bet. So let's dig into this. Of course, we remember that famous back and forth where I think President Trump all but told her, watch out, and you probably won't get reelected. And seems like they're standing their ground here. They don't seem to care. They're doubling down. They've got all sorts of programs coming out. What's going on?
It's really interesting, Rich, because the remainder of that sort of colloquy between the Maine governor, Janet Mills, and the president in an open forum when the entire world was watching, one of the last things she said to him was, "See you in court." And I thought, well, that's quite a bit of hubris for a governor to face the sitting chief executive of the United States, the sitting president, and say, "We'll see you in court." And Trump is actually right. He is the federal law. The federal executive, the federal judiciary, the federal legislative branches are the ones who enforce, apply, and interpret the law. She's a state governor. And while states have their own authority within a certain context to oversee things like, for example, education, this is a federal anti-discrimination law. Remember, we're talking about Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Been around for 54 years. Rich, you and I know it's a very short statute, 37 words. You cannot discriminate on the basis of sex in any federally funded education program. This is the hill on which Janet Mills has chosen to die because she refuses to keep biological separations in sports, even though the most accurate and recent polling, this is as of February, so 2 months ago, 2025, 80% of Americans of all political stripes want sports separated by biological sex. But for some reason, this is the issue for her that she is willing to stand down a sitting presidential administration on, even though all the 11 federal circuit courts that have weighed in on the previous administration's rule, Biden's rule on Title IX that included gender identity, every one of the 11 federal courts struck down the Biden administration's rule. He lost every time. The Supreme Court granted a nationwide injunction, and now here we have a governor who's willing to say, I'll go toe-to-toe with the president. Well, she's got about $250 million on the line.
Wow. Now, it seems like she's willing to lose that funding. But on top of that, it also seems like this hubris you mentioned, it seems like either it's for the sake of the cameras, for her political expediency, or perhaps does she know something that I don't, where she thinks she may have a loophole here?
Well, she's in, of course, the First Circuit, and the First Circuit is notoriously liberal, so she probably thinks, at least at the trial court phase and the appellate court phase, she'll get a victory. But then the next stop for her would be the U.S. Supreme Court, and let me tell you, the U.S. Supreme Court has already weighed in when it granted a temporary injunction for all of the states in the country so that the previous Biden administration rule was suspended. Remember, we're back to the same good old definition in 1972 of male and female and biological distinctions between sex. But she believes that if she can drag this out long enough, if I were her attorneys, if I were the individuals advising her, it would be, well, listen, we're going to get a favorable ruling in the trial court and in the appellate court. And then by the time it reaches the Supreme Court, maybe we can outlast the administration and we'll wait for another Democratic executive to come in. I don't think it's going to take that long. This can immediately be referred to the Department of Justice. And remember, Rich, you're a political student just like I am. We've seen Pam Bondi now take the oath of office. She is not messing around. Harmeet Dillon is going to be sworn in soon as the Secretary for Civil Rights. She would be litigating this particular case. This is going to be a slam dunk for the Trump administration. And it's one of those situations where I think for those of us who know the courts, we're scratching our heads because we know how the end game wins.
You know, this is one of those things being done, in my opinion, all for politics. Because ultimately what the governor will likely do is turn around, and if she gets a favorable response, like you said, she'll turn around and run and champion that and say, look, I told you we were right, we're great, we're terrific. And then it goes to the Supreme Court, and then it gets shot down, and she'll say, you know what, it's these bigots, these religious zealots on the court that pro-Trump rubber stamps, and this is why we have to stack the court.
That's exactly it. You know, you're so right, Rich. This really does. It's kind of self-fulfilling political rhetoric, right? So she actually gets to look like she's a hero to her hard left progressive base. Remember, we saw sitting congresswomen censored in a sitting state assembly proceeding because she had the gall to stand up and say men and women are biologically different and we have to follow federal law. They censured her. So this is where this is right now in terms of the political discourse. The people who have held fast to gender identity are doubling down because they recognize that the law and public sentiment are not on their side. Well, that's a terrifying place to be when you realize that you've been playing the emperor has no clothes game for a very, very long time. Now you have to get the rest of the public to go along with you. If you can't get the public, you will definitely get politics. And what you say about stacking the court is 100% accurate. Isn't that, of course, what we see repeatedly, that tired trope from the hard left about stacking the court when, of course, they don't get opinions that they like.
Yeah, and you know, Sarah Parshall Perry, sometimes I think and I wonder, maybe this was the plan. Maybe that's the idea when they say, oh, good, you know, like she gets into this tit for tat with the president. And then those people, the stack the court people, call her up and they say, hey, listen, we got you. We're raising some money to help with your legal defense. We're going to take this all the way because ultimately this is a stack the court play. And I feel like that so many of these ulterior motives are what make Washington work, even in this lawfare kind of scenario.
That's it. That's exactly it. And listen, we understand the power of the judiciary, right? So I think in this last administration, we saw the growth of the administrative state, and that is growth in all of the big executive agencies, that bloated bureaucracy. Biden grew the government like we had never seen before. And every rule he kept issuing, whether it was the national vaccine mandate through OSHA, whether it was the eviction moratorium through HUD, whether it was the Clean Air and Water Act through the EPA, every single time he kept getting struck down by the courts. Well, what we learned is that the courts are really the last defense against the onslaught of a bloated bureaucracy.
Sarah Parshall Perry, stand by. I want to come back and get your take on what is going on with the rest of the gender shenanigans happening in Maine. Apparently, they're hiding gender plans and violating FERPA, according to the Secretary of Education. Folks, keep it locked right here. Don't move a muscle. It's Rich Valdez. We're coming right back with Sarah Parshall Perry.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Today, the Department of Education is announcing an unprecedented directed investigation into the Maine Department of Education for alleged violations of the Family Educational Rights Privacy Act, or FERPA. We have heard disturbing reports that dozens of Maine school districts allow for schools to create gender plans that support a student's transgender identity and then hide those plans from parents, claiming they don't fall under education records. That is unacceptable and unlawful, if true. Parents and guardians have the right to access their child's education records to guide and safeguard their child's mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and we will uphold the law.
That, of course, is a stern announcement from Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education. And to continue on this topic and learn a little bit more what's going on here, Sarah Parshall Perry joins us. She's the incoming Vice President of Parents Defending Education. Sarah, tell us what's going on here.
This is really a horrifying trend, Rich. We've actually seen 1,200 school districts nationwide with 12 million children in those school districts that have express policies indicating that they will hide a minor's gender information from custodial parents if the minor child feels that the child parent is going to be unsupportive. Well, I have to tell you, Rich, I have 16, 18, and 20-year-old kids. There were a lot of things that I'm not supportive of, but this is what a good parent does. A good parent is involved. A good parent asks the questions, and a good parent wants to know how their child is identifying, what they are dealing with at school, how they are expressing themselves. But the Family Education Rights Privacy Act, which is a long-standing federal privacy law, is actually a privacy right that, believe it or not, Rich, is being activated, that can be exercised by the custodial parent until the child turns 18. The design is to prevent children's very sensitive private information from being accessed by individuals who are school teachers, school administrators, individuals in the education field. It's the parent who can act as that sort of guardian at the gate and say, this is my child's private information. And yet we've seen school districts say, oh, it's a violation of FERPA to forcibly out, I'm using air quotes, a child to their parents. That turns the federal law upside down. And while FERPA doesn't allow a private citizen to sue, it contains what's called no right of action. So there's no mechanism in the statute to be able to bring a lawsuit for violating privacy under FERPA. What it does specifically permit is the federal Department of Education to yank federal funding. And in the case of the state of Maine, that is $250 million a year. It is $250 million that's on the line. But again, Janet Mills, this for her is the hill on which she wants to die.
So what is the recourse here? Are parents going to start suing everybody, or is it just the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights that's going to be doing this suing, a combination thereof?
You know, I think it's going to have to be a combination of the two. And here's what we've seen already. We've seen about 7 or 8 federal lawsuits now percolate throughout the federal circuit courts all across the country, from California all the way up to Vermont. And we've seen the Supreme Court already see 2 Supreme Court petitions for review, what are called petitions for cert. They have been denied by the Supreme Court. One case out of the 4th Circuit in Maryland, one out of the 7th Circuit in Wisconsin. These 2 cases have been dismissed for whatever reason. The Supreme Court justices did not think those were the right vehicles. But what we have seen now is one coming out of the 11th Circuit and another coming out of the 1st. These particular cases are structured slightly differently. These are cases in which these parents have children who were socially transitioned, who had gender plans built for them, whose teachers, whose administrators were actively lying to the parents. So that's the difference between what the Constitution or what the justices would call a facial challenge for these policies. In other words, it's unconstitutional for everybody, and an as-applied challenge. In other words, it's unconstitutional also for me because they've damaged me and my relationship with my child. That's precisely how these 2 cases are structured. They are on their way up to the Supreme Court right now, and we could actually see the justices weigh in on taking them sometime over the long conference this summer.
Wow. This is, I guess we'll have to stay tuned and keep in touch with you to see what's going on with this. Folks, we're on with Sarah Parshall Perry. She's former senior counsel to the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the United States Department of Education, incoming Vice President of Parents Defending Education. And I want to congratulate you on the new role with PDE. They're a great organization and great mission.
Great mission, and they are doing incredible investigative work, figuring out exactly what's going on in the school districts, which is ultimately all being hidden in plain sight. Their research I've actually relied on in my legal work, in my time at Heritage, because their data, their numbers are so excellent. They're so accurate. And I'm really looking forward to taking this position with them so that we can reclaim ideologically neutral, bias-free public education. Listen, my children were a product of public education. I have two in private school, but they didn't go in until high school. My oldest is a graduate of public school. I was a graduate of public school. I believe in the cause, the mission, and the purpose of public education, but it's got to be free of one political agenda or another. And when we can get back to basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, science, civics, history, we're going to produce better, more successful future employees, future workers, and that's the opportunity, I think, for our entire culture, all of the boats to be risen on this tide.
Outstanding. Again, congrats on the new gig. And folks, Sarah Parshall Perry. Sarah, let them know where they could find you and follow you and keep up to speed with all the work you're doing.
So you can definitely follow me at Sarah P. Perry on X and follow Defending Ed on X as well. And we can post all of our research. We'll be posting data as we get it and a number of the OCR, what are civil rights complaints in education, as they happen right there on X.
Outstanding. Godspeed to you. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I'm grateful for the time you spent with us tonight.
God bless you, Rich.
You too. All right, amigos, we continue with your thoughts, your calls, reactions, open phones across America coming up right now. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I call this kind reciprocal. This is not full reciprocal. This is kind reciprocal. But what we do is we cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple. If they complain, if you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America.
No tariffs if you're building in America. Kind reciprocal, right? It's a kindler, gentler tariff. El Trompito again announcing today Liberation Day in America. I want to get your thoughts on everything that's going on here. We've got plenty to talk about. Let's go to Amarillo, Texas, KGNC. Michael, go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir.
I keep hearing over and over and over about everybody's worried about the amount of money that's going to go up with products because of the tariffs. And yes, the products that are being shipped over from other countries are going to go up because of the tariffs. But that doesn't mean that we can have to buy those products. We can buy products in the United States. We can go to other companies that don't have those tariffs that are horrible. It's going to force the whole world that involves with the United States into capitalism. I mean, just at its finest. It forces that. And I just keep I keep hearing everybody say it's going to make everything go up. Well, no, it'll make people, other countries, start charging less or get on board and, go with our country on how our tariffs should be the same. You want to do a tariff? We'll do a tariff. Let's all do the same.
Yeah, listen, I think you make a good point. And I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I think the idea that things will become more expensive is a reality. Things will become more expensive because there's a tariff attached to it. And you're right, you don't necessarily have to buy it. Now, the downside of that is if we're not buying these things, if you're not buying it somewhere else, if there's not an American alternative, then we've got a problem, Houston. But again, that problem's easily solved when this company says, you know what, let me make this investment and start building in the United States. So there's ultimately a win here. And I think the quicker people get around to the win, the better off we all will be, literally all of us. I think if I ran a business and I was forced into, having to pay a tariff, I'd probably consider putting a manufacturing facility here because it just makes sense, right? Play ball and you're in business. And, that makes all the sense in the world to me. Michael, Amarillo, Texas, KGNC. Thank you for your call, my brother. Let us continue. Where do we go? We're going to go to Shawboro, North Carolina, WTKF. Go right ahead.
Yeah, this is Tim.
I'm sorry, Tim. Forgive me.
Oh, you're good. So, long story short, hypothetical. Say I make $50,000 a year, right? Then I pick up this temporary government job that Biden gave me for $100,000 a year. I've got $50,000 more money to play with, which would inflate the stock market because I'm going to invest. It would inflate crypto because I'm going to invest. Now I'm losing that job, so guess what? I'm dumping my earnings. And now the stock market goes down, the crypto goes down.
You're 100% right.
There's a real issue.
Oh, yeah. And, this is something we talked about the other day. We had a good conversation with John Tabacco from Newsmax. He was on because he had attended the White House Crypto Summit probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is exactly the point he was making, was that the Biden administration was artificially inflating the stock market. They were buying our own T-bills from ourselves. And this made it look like things were hunky-dory on the stock market. But it wasn't. And now we're filtering through some of that, and we're seeing those corrections being made, and people are freaking out, making it look like, oh, my gosh, look what Trump is doing. He's breaking everything. But the reality is this stuff wasn't really working. Biden broke it. And the Band-Aid that he put in place, which wasn't much of a Band-Aid at all, it was a house of cards, if you will, is crumbling down. And what Trump is doing is actually rebuilding and making sure that he's building on a solid foundation. So, kudos to El Trumpito. He's doing a yeoman's task here and doing it the right way. He's built plenty of businesses. Biden hasn't built much over the years. If anything, he's been a big taker of taxpayer dollars and the government. So good point, Tim. Shawboro, North Carolina, WTKF in the building. Thank you, sir. And let me see. We continue. Pat, Sedona, Arizona, streaming on KFNX out of Phoenix. Go right ahead, sir.
Hey, Rich, a great show. I am so glad you can explain the tariff problem in our country that everybody thinks is a problem. And you're right. Under Joe Biden, he did a lot of things that Trump's going to get blamed for. We're all going to get hurt. Now, I've taken a hit in my stock market portfolio. That's where I make my money. But I know what's happening. I'm hanging on. I am keeping my wits about me. And I just think that people need to understand that we're going to go through some pain because the last administration messed everything up. Everything. I mean everything, people. And the environmental people are coming clean. They're saying, oh, yeah, I wrote this paper, but it was just a bunch of phooey. You had that gentleman a few days ago on your show. And I tell you what, you really are on the mark when it comes to all these things. I hope people really understand how much of a jewel you are to the truth. I mean, you organize it and see, and people could say, well, God, look at these tariffs. It's going to hurt us. These are strategic. Now, that doesn't tell exactly all what he's doing, but it's going to work for us, and it's going to work for our country. I think these companies should come in. And here's an idea I have. How about giving incentives, like they have enterprise zones in states, to bring in companies from other parts, other states? You know, we want you, like airplane company, McDonnell Douglas, to come to our state and build airplanes. We'll help you with the land. We'll give you the land almost for free. And I think maybe that's an incentive. Maybe Trump is not hit on, but maybe, I don't know if I'm in that right.
Well, I mean, I get the point. I think you're saying, to use maybe some federal land or incentivize, I guess, a tax, some sort of tax credit for real estate deals. But I think all of the above is possible. Obviously, McDonnell Douglas, which is Boeing today, is an American company. But I get your point. You want to offer everybody the opportunity to compete equally across the playing field, and I think that makes all the sense in the world. You got room for Burger King, you got room for McDonald's. Pat in Sedona, Arizona, thank you, brother. I appreciate your kind words, the compliment you paid me, very generous of you, and couldn't do this stuff without great guys like you out there listening and contributing to the conversation. So Godspeed to you, brother. Always, again, thank you for your service. Taking a pause right here, coming right back. Sioux City, Iowa, Burlington, Vermont, Montreal, Canada. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's go to the phones. WVMT, Matt, Burlington, Vermont. Matt, go right ahead. You're on.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to make a point. I agree with your last guest. It could take a couple of years to get manufacturing stood up. Trump changes in 5 minutes.
Say again. I didn't hear you. Repeat the last part.
Trump changes his mind every 5 minutes on tariffs.
When did Trump change his mind in 5 minutes?
Well, we had that whiplash. The last time he put tariffs on was about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago. It was like back and forth. They were on, they're off, they're on, they're off.
Well, I don't think they were on or off. I think he said, we're doing it. We're doing it on April 2nd. We're not going to do it on April 1st, so you don't think I'm fooling around. And he put the tariffs out there, and then many people acquiesced. So he said, all right, we're going to give it a pause. And that, again, is the effectiveness of the tariffs actually working. So, I mean, I don't think there should be any incentive for any country anywhere to think that the United States is going to institute a policy that benefits a country that's other than the United States. I think it's important for them to realize that if today there are wildfires and we need water, we're going to have policies that incentivize water. But if tomorrow we need something else, then our policies are going to reflect what we need tomorrow. And that should always be the America First mantra that the United States espouses. And I think this is why so many people support President Trump. The alternative is creating policy that benefits other people, putting people, the profits of the company above the people. And that, I think, would be a big mistake. But thank you, sir, for your call. Matt in Burlington, Vermont. And let us continue. Where do I want to go here? I want to go to Jimmy, Sioux City, Iowa, streaming the show tonight. Jimmy, go right ahead.
Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Wonderful, thank you.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm doing well myself. So I just wanted to share a quick thing. I actually worked for Mr. Trump during his campaign. I didn't work underneath him directly. I actually just did things for the campaign, including, and I swear, and I mean this on my grave, I was there when Mr. Trump was shot in Pennsylvania. So I just wanted to add that as my experience. And I just wanted to share with what's going on in Gaza, I think what would be great.
All right, Jimmy, you used all of your time telling your backstory and you didn't get your point out in time. I thank you for the call. Thank you for listening. Robert in Athens, shout out to you. Jane in WGDJ, shout out to you. Tony in Montreal, sorry to leave you guys on hold. Folks, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.